Most mornings don't start with light. They start with weight. It's strange how the world can be quiet and loud at the same time. How the room is still, but your chest already feels crowded. How the day hasn't touched you yet, but you already feel behind. I wake up and there it is again. That familiar pressure, that quiet dread, the sense that I am already late to my own life. Sometimes I lie there pretending I don't exist yet, hoping the day won't notice me if I stay still enough, hoping the questions won't find me, hoping the fear will oversleep. There's a moment right before the day begins where everything is honest. No noise, no roles, no performance, just breath, just thought, just the truth I don't say out loud. And the truth is, I'm tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that lives in the bones, the kind that comes from carrying things that never get put down, from being strong when no one is watching, from smiling when something inside me quietly breaks and I don't even pause to look at it. I tell myself I'm fine so often that it almost feels true, almost. But then the morning comes and all the pretending loosens its grip. I feel how heavy my name is, how heavy my expectations are, how heavy it is to keep being the version of myself everyone recognizes, while the real one keeps shrinking in the background, waiting to be noticed. There are thoughts I have only in the morning, thoughts I don't trust myself with during the day, like the fear that maybe I've already missed something important, that the best version of me passed quietly and I didn't recognize it, that maybe I've been surviving so long I forgot what it feels like to live without bracing myself. I don't talk about how often I doubt my own voice, how often I rehearse my feelings in silence and then swallow them whole, how I sometimes feel like a guest in my own body, careful not to touch anything too deeply in case it all collapses. There's a loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling unseen, a loneliness that doesn't scream, it just sits. Morning exposes that loneliness. It doesn't accuse, it just reveals. It shows me the gap between who I am and who I keep trying to be. It reminds me of the promises I made to myself when I was younger. Promises I quietly broke in the name of survival. Promises I never meant to break, but did anyway, one compromise at a time. Some days I wonder when I learned to betray myself so gently that it felt normal. When I learned to call numbness peace. When I learned to confuse silence with strength. I carry that question into the early hours before the world asks anything of me, and for a moment I let myself feel it. The grief, the regret, the tenderness I keep hidden because it feels too risky to hold in public. I've noticed that mornings don't ask for performance. They don't demand confidence. They don't need answers. They just ask me to be present with what's real. And what's real is that part of me is scared. Scared of failing again, scared of hoping again, scared of opening doors inside myself that I worked so hard to keep closed. Because once you open them, you can't pretend you didn't see what was inside. There's a quiet voice in me that wakes up before the rest. It doesn't shout, it doesn't inspire, it just tells the truth. It says, I'm tired of fighting invisible battles. It says, I'm tired of proving my worth to rooms that never ask for my heart, only my usefulness. It says, I miss myself. And that sentence hurts more than I expected to. I miss the version of me that trusted mornings, that believed a new day meant something, that didn't wake up already negotiating with fear. Somewhere along the way, mornings became something to endure instead of something to enter. And I don't even remember when that shift happened. I just know it did. Sometimes I sit with that realization and feel the ache of it settle in my chest. The ache of knowing I've been living reactively, letting the day shape me instead of meeting it as myself, letting my wounds speak for me, letting old disappointments decide how much of me I'm willing to show. There's a softness that mornings offer, but only if I'm honest enough to accept it. A softness that doesn't erase the pain, but sits with it. That doesn't rush healing, but allows space. In that softness, I notice how much I've been holding my breath, how much of my life has been lived in tension, waiting for something to go wrong, even when nothing is happening. I realize how often I wake up already apologizing, already bracing, already shrinking, as if the day is something I need to survive rather than something I'm allowed to inhabit. That realization doesn't come with clarity or relief. It comes with a quiet sadness, the kind that doesn't cry, but stays. And yet, in that same stillness, there's something else, something fragile, something almost easy to miss. A sense that even though I feel fractured, I am still here. That even though I've been tired and afraid and disconnected, I've also been enduring, breathing, showing up in the only ways I knew how. That maybe my exhaustion isn't failure, but evidence of how much I've carried. I don't need the morning to fix me. I don't need it to promise me success or certainty. I just need it to let me exist without pretending. To let me admit that some days I don't know who I am becoming. That some days I feel like a stranger to myself. That some days the bravest thing I do is simply stay. There's an intimacy in those early moments that feels sacred in its own quiet way. A chance to acknowledge the parts of me that never get acknowledged. The fear that lives behind my ambition. The sadness behind my humor. The longing behind my discipline. The hope I pretend I don't have because it feels safer not to name it. I notice how Namin, these things doesn't make them louder. It makes them gentler, less sharp, less hidden. Like they've been waiting to be seen, not solved. Waiting for me to stop running long enough to sit with them. Morning doesn't rush me. It doesn't demand transformation. It just holds space. And in that space, I start to feel something loosen. Not the problems, not the pain, but the grip they have on my identity. I realize I am more than my fear, more than my fatigue, more than the version of myself shaped by disappointment. This isn't confidence, it's honesty. And honesty feels steadier, less dramatic, more real. It feels like standing barefoot on the floor of my own life and finally admitting where I am. I think about the day ahead, not as a list of tasks, but as a landscape, unknown, unpredictable. And instead of trying to control it, I let myself feel into it. I notice how much I want peace. Not excitement, not applause, just peace. A sense that I can move through the hours without abandoning myself. I don't ask to be fearless. I just ask not to be ruled by fear. I don't ask to be strong. I just ask to be honest when I'm not. There's something grounding about that simplicity. Something human. The morning doesn't promise me that everything will work out. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't guarantee clarity. But it gives me one quiet truth to stand on. That I am still allowed to begin again, even if I'm tired, even if I'm unsure, even if I don't fully trust myself yet. And maybe, that's what it means to command the day. Not with force, not with certainty, but with presence. With the courage to face myself before I face the world. With the willingness to tell the truth in silence, even if no one else ever hears it. I breathe, slowly, deeply. And for a moment, the noise inside me softens. The fear doesn't disappear, but it steps back. The weight doesn't vanish, but it feels shared. I feel like I'm no longer fighting the day before it begins. I don't know what this day will bring. I don't know who I will have to be. I don't know which parts of me will feel strong and which will feel fragile. But I know this moment is real. And in this moment, I am still here, still breathing, still capable of meeting myself with a little more kindness than yesterday. The morning holds that truth gently without asking me to prove anything. And for now, that is enough. Morning arrives before anything else has a chance to pretend, before the noise, before the expectations, before the face you put on for the world. It arrives quietly, but it doesn't feel light. It feels heavy in a way that is hard to explain, like carrying a bag you forgot you were holding until your arms start to ache. You wake up and nothing has happened yet, but something already hurts. The room is still, yet your chest feels crowded, like the day has already stepped inside you without knocking. There is a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from effort, but from existence. From waking up every day and remembering who you have to be. From remembering what you're responsible for. From remembering what you've been avoiding. Morning exposes that exhaustion because there is nothing to distract you from it yet. No conversations, no screens, no movement. Just you and the quiet truth that you are tired in places sleep never reaches. You lie there and feel the weight settle. Not just in your body, but in your thoughts. Old worries resurface before your eyes even fully open. Unfinished conversations, unspoken disappointments. The pressure to be okay. The fear of falling behind again. It's strange how the day hasn't started, yet you already feel like you're chasing it, like you owe something you haven't even spent yet. This weight doesn't announce itself dramatically. It doesn't scream. It just presses. It's the kind of pressure that becomes familiar, so familiar that you forget it isn't normal. You learn to move with it, to smile with it, to function with it. But in the morning, before the rhythm of survival kicks in, you feel it clearly, and for a moment you wonder how long you've been carrying this without rest. There's a quiet grief in that realization, not loud enough to cry over, but deep enough to ache. Grief for how much of yourself has been used just to get through days. Grief for how often you wake up already bracing, already tense, already preparing to endure. It's not that life has been cruel every day. It's that you've been strong every day, and strength takes so missing from you when it's never put down. You notice how your body holds this weight, the tight jaw, the shallow breath, the heaviness in your shoulders, as if even in rest you're preparing for impact, as if peace is something temporary, something you can't fully trust. Morning reveals how guarded you've become, how alert, how careful, even when nothing is happening yet. And maybe the hardest part is that no one sees this. The world meets you later when you're dressed, composed, functional. It doesn't see the version of you that wakes up tired before trying. It doesn't see the moment where you consider staying still just a little longer, not out of laziness, but out of fatigue with beginning again. That private moment belongs only to you, and sometimes it feels unbearably lonely. You tell yourself it's fine, that everyone feels this way, that this is just life. And maybe that's true. But the truth beneath that truth is that you're tired of pretending the weight isn't there. Of dismissing your own heaviness because it doesn't look dramatic enough to deserve attention. Tired of being strong in silence. Morning doesn't judge this tiredness. It doesn't rush you past it. It simply reveals it. Like a mirror you didn't ask for but needed. In that reflection, you see how much effort it takes just to arrive at the start of the day. How much emotional labor happens before anything visible begins. How much of your life is lived inwardly, unacknowledged, unnamed. There's vulnerability in admitting this weight exists. Because once you admit it, you can't pretend you're untouched. You can't hide behind productivity or routine. You're left with the simple, unsettling truth that you are human. And being human costs something. Every morning you wake up and choose to continue. And yet, there's something quietly powerful in noticing the weight without running from it. In sitting with it for breath longer. In letting yourself feel it instead of immediately numbing it. Not to fix it, not to conquer it. Just to acknowledge that it's real. That you are carrying more than you let on, that your tiredness has a story. Morning holds space for that story without asking you to explain it. It lets the weight exist without turning it into failure. And in that stillness, even though the heaviness remains, something shifts slightly. The burden feels seen, and being seen, even by yourself, changes how much it hurts to carry. As the day waits quietly for you to rise and step into it, carrying everything you are with no applause, no relief, just breath and the slow awareness that you are still here, still waking, still holding the weight and moving forward anyway. There's a moment when you realize you've been leaving yourself behind, and it doesn't arrive with drama. It comes quietly, almost politely, like a thought you try to ignore because it feels inconvenient. You're going about your life, doing what needs to be done, and suddenly it hits you that somewhere along the way you learned how to silence parts of yourself just to keep moving. Not because you wanted to, because it felt necessary, because staying soft felt dangerous, because listening to your own truth felt like it might cost you something you weren't ready to lose. At first, it doesn't feel like betrayal. It feels like maturity, like strength, like discipline. You tell yourself this is what growing up looks like. You tell yourself everyone makes these adjustments. You ignore the small discomforts, the quiet resistance inside you because they seem insignificant compared to survival. You swallow words, you adjust your boundaries, you compromise your instincts just a little, just for now, and each time you do, it feels reasonable, sensible, even responsible. But those small moments don't disappear. They collect. They stack up quietly deep inside until one day you can't remember the last time you fully trusted your own voice. You can't remember when you stopped asking yourself what you needed and started only asking what was required. You wake up feeling disconnected, but you can't point to a single cause. There was no explosion, no clear loss, just a slow erosion of self that happened while you were busy coping. There's a particular sadness in realizing you've trained yourself not to feel too much, not because you wanted to be numb, but because feeling became exhausting, because disappointment hurt, because hope felt risky. So you learned to lower the volume on everything, joy included. You called it peace. You told yourself you were calm now, stable, unbothered. But deep down you know it isn't peace. It's absence. It's the quiet that comes from not letting anything touch you too deeply anymore. You notice it in the way you react to things that once mattered. The muted excitement, the delayed sadness, the way moments pass through you without landing. You function well, you show up, you smile when expected, and no one questions it because on the outside everything looks fine. But inside, there's a distance between you and your own experience. Like you're watching your life from a few steps back, careful not to get too involved. This is the cost of self-betrayal that no one talks about. Not the big regrets, but the dulling, the gradual loss of color, the way you stop trusting your emotional reactions because you've overridden them for so long. The way your intuition grows quiet, not because it disappeared, but because it learned you weren't listening. Sometimes you catch glimpses of what you've buried. In rare moments of honesty, in unexpected tears, in sudden anger that feels disproportionate. These moments surprise you because they remind you that you still feel, that the numbness was never complete, that parts of you have been waiting patiently, even stubbornly for acknowledgement. There's guilt in this realization, a heavy one. You wonder how you let this happen, how you agreed to lives and roles and expectations that slowly required you to shrink. You wonder if you could have chosen differently, if you should have been braver, if you failed yourself somewhere along the way. But that guilt doesn't bring clarity. It just adds another layer of weight to carry. What hurts most is understanding that you weren't trying to hurt yourself. You were trying to survive. You were doing the best you could with what you had at the time. The betrayal wasn't malicious. It was quiet, accidental. Built from moments where choosing yourself felt impossible or selfish or unsafe. Built from days where you believed endurance mattered more than authenticity. And now you're here, aware, awake to the cost, feeling the gap between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. That awareness doesn't come with solutions. It comes with tenderness, with grief, with the soft ache for the parts of you that adapted in silence, that learned to disappear without complaint. You don't need to punish yourself for this. You've already carried enough. What you're feeling now isn't failure. It's recognition. It's the quiet moment when numbness cracks just enough to let truth breathe again. When you realize that what you called peace was actually protection, and that protection has run its course. There's something fragile in this stage, something easily misunderstood. It's not about fixing anything yet. It's about noticing, about sitting with the discomfort of knowing you want more honesty with yourself, even if you don't know how to give it yet. About allowing the truth to exist without rushing to clean it up. Because the fact that you can feel this at all means you haven't disappeared. It means you're still here, beneath the habits and the armor and the quiet compromises. Waiting, listening, ready in your own time to be met again without force, without shame, without pretending that numbness was ever the same thing as peace. There is a loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being present everywhere except inside yourself. From showing up, responding, engaging, and still feeling like no one has actually touched the real part of you. You can be surrounded by voices, faces, movement, and yet carry a quiet sense of isolation that follows you from room to room. Not because people don't care, but because the version of you they meet is carefully edited, carefully managed, carefully safe. You learn early how to be this version. The one who doesn't burden anyone, the one who keeps things light, the one who says the right things at the right time. You become good at reading the room, good at adjusting, good at giving people what makes them comfortable, and it works. People like you, they rely on you. They see you as stable, but what they don't see is the cost of being this accessible while remaining unseen. There's a particular ache that comes from being needed but not known, from being valued for what you provide rather than who you are. You notice how conversations rarely go past the surface of you. How one asks the questions you're afraid to answer. How you rarely volunteer the truth because you're not sure anyone actually wants it. And so you keep it contained, neatly folded inside, telling yourself it's better this way. At first, it feels like control, like strength, like maturity. You believe that keeping your inner world private is a form of self-respect. But over time, the silence grows heavier. You start to feel like a background presence in your own life, like you're participating without fully arriving. And that realization stings because you're doing everything right, yet something essential feels missing. You notice this loneliness most in moments that should feel shared. A laugh that fades too quickly. A success that feels strangely hollow. A problem you solve alone without even thinking to reach out. These moments reveal the gap between connection and intimacy, between being around people and being known by them. And you wonder, when you learn to stop expecting the second one, there's fear underneath this loneliness. Fear that if you were fully honest, it would change how people see you. Fear that your vulnerability would be misunderstood or dismissed. Fear that you would become too much, or worse, not enough. So you keep performing functionality. You keep offering the parts of yourself that are easy to accept, and the deeper parts wait quietly, learning patience the hard way. The world rewards this kind of self-containment. It praises resilience. It admires independence. It doesn't ask what you've had to suppress to become so capable. And you play along because it's safer than risking rejection, because it's familiar, because you've learned how to survive in this space where no one asks you to open the doors you've worked so hard to close. But the loneliness remains. It doesn't shout, it hums. It shows up in small ways, in the pause before you speak honestly and then don't, in the way you downplay your feelings even to yourself, in the quiet disappointment that follows social moments that were supposed to fill you but didn't. You leave feeling drained rather than connected, and you can't quite explain why. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to be fully seen, not admired, not praised, just understood, to speak without filtering, to exist without calculating. The thought feels both comforting and terrifying, because being seen means being vulnerable, and vulnerability means risking the safety you've built through distance. So you stay where you are, functional, reliable, slightly removed. You tell yourself this is just how life is, that deep connection is rare, that wanting to be known is naive, but the longing doesn't go away. It waits, patient, persistent, reminding you that something human in you wants more than efficiency and politeness. This loneliness isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a quiet indication that you are more than the roles you perform, more than the version of yourself that keeps everything running smoothly. It points to the parts of you that have been asking for recognition, not attention, just acknowledgement. And even now, as you carry this unseen weight, there's something honest happening. You're aware of it. You're naming it, even if only internally. That awareness doesn't fix the loneliness, but it softens it. It turns isolation into information. It reminds you that the desire to be seen means there is still something in you worth seeing. You may not know how to bridge the distance yet. You may not feel ready to open the doors. But the fact that you feel this loneliness at all means you haven't numbed yourself completely. It means you still recognize the difference between being present and being known. And that recognition, however quiet, is the beginning of something real, something alive, something waiting beneath the surface as you continue to move through the world surrounded by people, yet carrying the tender truth that you are still learning how to be seen without disappearing yourself in the process. There are moments when the world hasn't fully woken up yet, and neither have you. And in that thin space between sleep and movement, something honest slips through. Your defenses are low. Your mind hasn't put on its armor. You are not trying to be anything yet. And in that quiet, feelings rise that you usually keep buried under routine and noise. Not because you're weak, but because you're human. And silence has a way of telling the truth without raising its voice. These early moments don't come with clarity. They come with fragments. Half-formed thoughts, sensations, a tightness in the chest you can't name. A memory that drifts in without explanation. A sadness that doesn't attach itself to a single reason. You don't analyze it, you don't explain it, you just feel it. And that alone feels unsettling because you've trained yourself to stay ahead of your emotions, not sit inside them. There is fear in this stillness, not the loud kind that makes you panic, but the subtle kind that makes you aware of how much you've been avoiding. Fear of what you might discover if you stop moving. Fear of the questions you haven't been ready to ask yourself. Fear of realizing that some of the things you've been telling yourself aren't entirely true. In the quiet, those fears don't accuse you. They simply stand there waiting to be acknowledged. Alongside the fear, regret often appears. Not dramatic regret, but a gentle ache for moments that passed without being fully lived. For choices that felt safe but small. For words you swallowed because saying them felt too risky. You don't beat yourself up over it. You just notice the weight of it. The awareness that life doesn't only move forward, it also leaves things behind, and some of those things still matter to you more than you want to admit. There is also longing in this space, a deep unnamed longing that doesn't point to a specific goal or outcome. It's more like a memory of how you once felt or how you believed you could feel again. A longing for honesty, for rest, for connection that doesn't require performance. You feel it briefly, like a warmth that almost reaches the surface, and then you instinctively pull back, unsure if you're allowed to want something so tender. What makes these moments fragile is that nothing is protecting you. There is no distraction, no validation, no audience, just you and whatever is real. And because of that, it feels risky to stay there too long. You're tempted to reach for your phone, to get up, to fill this space. But part of you hesitates. Part of you knows that if you rush past this, you'll lose something important, something that only shows up when you're not trying to manage yourself. In this stillness, you see yourself more clearly, not the version shaped by expectations, but the one shaped by experience, the one carrying old disappointments, quiet hopes, unresolved questions. You realize how much you've been holding in, how often you've chosen composure over truth, and instead of judging yourself for it, you feel a strange compassion. You understand why you did what you did, why you adapted, why you learned to protect yourself the way you did. These early moments don't demand that you change anything. They don't ask for action or resolution. They simply invite you to witness yourself without interference. To let fear exist without pushing it away. To let regret be felt without trying to rewrite the past. To let longing breathe without immediately turning it into a plan. And that invitation is rare in a world that constantly asks you to be decisive and certain. There is something grounding about this honesty. It doesn't make you feel stronger or braver. It makes you feel real. It reminds you that beneath the habits and roles, there is a person who still feels deeply, even if they've been quiet about it. A person who hasn't disappeared, only paused, waiting for a moment of safety to emerge. As the day edges closer and the noise begins to return, you sense these feelings starting to retreat. The armor begins to form again. Responsibilities call, but something lingers. A trace of truth, a softness you don't want to lose completely. You don't hold on to it tightly. You just remember that it exists. These fragile moments of honesty don't solve your life. They don't erase fear or regret, but they leave you with a subtle shift, a quieter relationship with yourself. You move into the day carrying the awareness that beneath everything, there is still a place where you can be honest without explanation, where you can exist without defense, where your inner world is allowed to be complex and unresolved and real, and that knowledge stays with you as you step forward into the movement of the day, still carrying the echo of that early truth quietly alive inside you. There is a misunderstanding about power that settles into us over time. We begin to think it means control, certainty, a firm grip on outcomes and emotions. We imagine in it as confidence that never wavers, as strength that doesn't pause to feel. But somewhere deep inside, there is another understanding, quieter and less impressive, that keeps trying to surface, a sense that the real struggle isn't about controlling the day, but about not losing yourself inside it. Presence doesn't arrive like a victory. It arrives like a pause, a breath that interrupts the momentum of fear, a moment where you notice yourself noticing. And in that small awareness, something shifts. You realize how often you move through your days on autopilot, responding to demands, expectations, old habits, without fully being there. You realize how easy it is to abandon yourself without realizing you've done it. There is a familiar pattern in how you start most days. Your mind jumps ahead to tasks, to worries, to what might go wrong. Your body follows, tightening, preparing. You are already gone, already somewhere else, and the day hasn't even begun. Presence asks for something different, but it doesn't demand it. It simply waits for you to return to where you are, even if only briefly. Being present doesn't mean everything becomes calm or clear. It means you feel what you feel without immediately trying to escape it. It means you notice the anxiety instead of letting it silently steer you. You notice the exhaustion instead of pretending it isn't there. You notice the resistance, the heaviness, the quiet hope all at once. And in that noticing, you are still yourself, not a reaction, not a role, not a defense. There is a tenderness in this kind of awareness. It doesn't judge you for struggling. It doesn't push you to be better. It simply allows you to exist as you are right now. And that allowance feels unfamiliar because you spend so much time measuring yourself by productivity, by progress, by how well you perform under pressure. Presence steps outside of that measurement entirely. You begin to see how much of your fear comes from being mentally absent, from living in imagined futures or unresolved pasts. When you return to the present moment, the fear doesn't vanish, but it loses some of its authority. It becomes a feeling instead of a command. It no longer defines you. It's just something passing through. There is quiet strength in staying with yourself when things are uncomfortable, not fixing, not explaining, just staying. That kind of staying requires honesty because there's no distraction to hide behind. You see your patterns more clearly, the way you tense up, the way you rush, the way you disconnect when things feel too intense, and instead, criticizing yourself for it, you simply notice. That noticing alone begins to loosen the grip these patterns have on you. Presence also reveals something gentle, that you don't have to be fully healed to be whole in this moment, that you don't need answers to be here, that you are allowed to exist even when you are uncertain, even when you are tired, even when you don't feel particularly strong. This realization doesn't come with excitement, it comes with relief. As you move through the day with even a trace of this awareness, things feel different, not easier, but more grounded. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of panic. You feel the edges of yourself more clearly. And when you start to drift away again, as you inevitably do, you notice sooner. You come back sooner. That return becomes its own quiet rhythm. This is where a different kind of authority emerges. Not the authority to control what happens, but the authority to remain connected to yourself regardless of what happens. To not hand over your inner world to every external demand. To move through challenges without disappearing inside them. There is humility in this kind of power. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek validation. It works quietly, internally, reshaping your relationship with the moment you are in. You stop trying to dominate the day and instead you meet it. You meet it as you are, with whatever you're carrying, without pretending otherwise. And in that meeting, something steady. Yes, you may still feel fear, you may still feel doubt, but you are there with yourself, not ahead of yourself, not outside yourself. That alone changes how the day unfolds, not because the circumstances obey you, but because you are no longer abandoning yourself in order to get through them. And that quiet choice continues moment by moment as you move forward. Breathing, noticing, staying present, and carrying yourself gently through whatever comes without needing to arrive anywhere else.